Hi, I'm Danielle, and this is Chatter Out Loud, a podcast where I share thoughts and TV commentary, starting with one of my favorite shows, Big Brother. In this episode, I'm sharing a recap of Big Brother Season 23, Final 3 Players. Okay, so you guys, we are within the final week of the Big Brother season. Next Wednesday is the live season finale, 2 hours, and we'll watch the jury vote and have their final say on which house guest will be crowned the winner of Big Brother Season 23. And if you didn't know, this season will be Big Brother's first Black winner of the U.S. version of Big Brother. As a unit, the Cookout executed such a great strategy, masterminded by Tiffany, and her strategic brilliance got all 6 of the Cookout members into the final 6. It was great. And as they all expected, at the final 6, they could quote-unquote play for themselves. At this point of the game, it's funny that they say they're playing for themselves, when what we're witnessing is still a team mentality or team mindset, but within the Cookout. And what I mean by that is we have Big D and Azah. They're teaming up and they were on the Jokers. And then we have X and Big D in a final 2. So they've teamed up. Would I have chosen these 3 individuals within the Cookout for the final 3? Absolutely not. If you listen to my last episode, you would understand my point of view and where I stand in these final 4, now the final 3 house guests. In a perfect scenario, I would have preferred to have Tiffany, Xavier, and Kyland in a final 3, with Tiffany moving forward to a final 2, cutting X and bringing Kyland to a final 2, followed by a unanimous vote for Tiffany to win over Kyland. And why would I love that scenario? Well, it's because I'd hope that it would check both X and Kai's egos to start. Both of these guys are something else, but we'll talk about that a little later. But back to reality. The final 3 we have for this season are Xavier, Azah, and Derek F. or Big D. So you'll hear me interchange those names. Derek F. or Big D. That's the same person. We ended up here after X decided not to use the power of veto. He kept the nominations the same, leaving Azah and Kyland on the block. But before I delve into that, I wanted to first acknowledge how cool I thought that the current jury members were very receptive to Tiffany's explanation of the master plan and her strategy to get the Cookout members to the final 6. So that was from a jury segment that they showed in that the last episode that they aired. And when she came into the jury, people are surprised, like, oh no. And she answered a lot of questions that they had in terms of the final 6, and she gave them the name of it and, the reasoning behind it and all of that. So I found that the jury members I found that the jury members that were in the jury house right now, they were very receptive to what Tiffany explained. They appreciated it from a player standpoint, and they're fans of Big Brother themselves. So they really seemed like they weren't bothered or bitter about it. And even Sarah Beth shook her head in the affirmative. Yeah, I get it. I understand. So that was nice to see. I also want to acknowledge how Azah, when she's talking with Big D, acknowledges how great of a player Tiffany was in the game and how much work she put in. And it just makes me laugh because when I watch Big D's response in his face every time Azah says this, it's so funny. And I just think he's so silly. Oh yeah. And I also want to say that, based on the last episode that aired, we learned that they've doubled the cash prize for America's favorite player. Well, now I think they call it America's favorite house guest. So the prize went from $25,000 to $50,000. So that was exciting to hear and exciting to see. The house guests don't know that yet, so I can't wait for them to see that on finale night. I've been voting, and I hope you have been voting too. This year, you cast your vote by text to 97979. and the name of the person that you would like to vote for. Hashtag BB Tiffany. Or I shouldn't say that. Just type Tiffany. Yeah, type Tiffany's name to 97979. Okay. So during the live eviction, Derek F. evicted Kylan. A couple of observations here. Derek F. was able to string the sentence together to say, "I cast my e-vote to evict." I believe this was the closest we've gotten to a coherent vote by Derek F. So I was happy for him about that in that moment. The look on Kylan's face when after Big D evicted him, that was telling. But I expected that, right? As I've said in the last episode and a few tweets, at this point in the game, the end is so close. So when the person is booted out at this stage, it kind of hurts a little more. So we're bound to see more emotional reactions, right? Kylan's confrontation with X. In that moment, I felt so disappointed. I was disappointed in both X and Kai. And I'll tell you why. So the disappointment in X, I know why he felt he needed to blindside Kylan. He didn't want to endure the hours of long conversations and the one-on-one and with Kai explaining and why he wouldn't use the veto and all of that. And it was a strategic move, right? But in that, he's gaslighting Derek F. or Big D to do his bidding, and he's manipulating him into thinking it's a power move for Big D, etc. Right? So we all know X will use that to add to his own resume, right? Because he set it up for Kylan to get out. And we know that, right? The whole thing with not wanting to talk with Kylan beforehand and the whole blind side and how he was talking to America through the cameras and kind of making Kylan feel or look foolish. I thought it was cowardice. That's my opinion. All right. So the disappointment in Kai. All right, there's a lot there. The way he pulled in X's nephew into the eviction and tying it into a reflection on character and facing challenges and playing the game with honor. In any other context, there may have been validity to what Kai was saying, but in this instance, I don't think so. It showed poor sportsmanship for sure. And like I said, at the end, it hurts them more to have to leave the game when they're so close. So I understand him being a little bitter. But in that moment, everything Kai did was just wrong. And it was a poor reflection of him as a player. It was self-centered. It was a bit much. He just had to make sure he told Kai, Kai meaning he meaning Kai, just needed to be in control and make sure he told X about himself and how his character was lacking. And the way he carried on in his exit interviews and the interview with Julie, it just was disgusting. It just proves that he struggles with control issues and has so many insecurities. He feels like he has to be in control of everything. And yet when he's not in control, look how he spirals. He always wants things to go his way. He thinks that his way of thinking is quote unquote objective. He thinks he's morally superior, which is laughable, especially in the game of Big Brother. I mean, think about it. These people lie, they manipulate, they maneuver. A lot of the time, although they may not say it, but a lot of them just want the money. It's a game. They want to win the grand prize, right? But like Kai tries to dress it up in the words of, oh, it's honorable, and it's ridiculous. And the whole thing with him priming the partner, when I think I mentioned this in the last episode, priming the partner, I'm almost certain he used a term like that. It's nuts to me. It's Kai's way of preparing the house guests to leave. You know, their partners. You got to prime the partner to leave the house. That's really unnecessary. And I'm not a fan of Sarah Beth at all, but the way he primed her and then her response to it, especially when they showed the jury segment last week, just shows that it was all unnecessary. And she saw right through it, just like a lot of the jury members see right through Kai. Like Kai thinks he's manipulating people and he's so smart and he's smarter than everyone else in the room. Meanwhile, everybody knows what he's doing. Everybody sees through what he's doing. So it's not that effective. People don't like him. So even if he were to make it to the final two, he wouldn't have won. But that's a whole nother story. And one other thing, I really would like someone to talk with Kai and say, listen, learn how to talk to people, not down to people. Like he feels he's better than people and smarter than people. So the way he talks to people is just so condescending. It's a bit much. And the fact that he convinced himself like what he was doing was objective, no, just no. And the audacity of him saying that he wanted a good representation of the first Black winner, which is one reason he voted Tiffany out. And no matter how he tries to mansplain this later, we all know what he meant. We all translated what he meant. And I find it disgusting, Kyland. And I hope he answers for that once he leaves the house. And I hope he takes, he reflects on that and realizes where he was wrong in saying something like that, especially about Tiffany and Hannah. And who is he to determine what's a good representation of the first Black winner? I mean, it's just, it's a little offensive, and it contradicts like what the whole meaning of the cookout was showing, right? The cookout, well, not the cookout, but the fact that they had 6 Black people in the house this year, and they're all different. Black people aren't a monolith. We're all different. We come in different shades and sizes and backgrounds and all this other stuff. What does that mean, Kylan? You want a good representation. Like, what does that mean? And why do you think you and Xavier fulfills that? It's just, when he gets out, I hope he gets lit up on Twitter. And I hope he regrets saying that, and he owes Tiffany a public apology. I mean, it's just disgusting. And don't even get me started on him telling Julie during when he was voted out how he thought he was a decent player and hope he's invited back. Ugh, nobody wants to see you back. Anyway, I love the cookout as a unit and how they move through the game to get to a final 6. During that time, Colin has consistently been an ass, so we really shouldn't be surprised by anything he says moving forward, right? And I can see him now trying to mansplain. You watch what I say. He's going to try to just explain and wonder why, like, people don't get it. It's so objective. He's such an ass. Like, sometimes I don't want to get personal, but no, I'm not going there. I'm moving on. Okay. A lot of what we've seen after the live eviction is more of the same. We have Big D and his delusions. He really believed what he says. And to be clear, Big D has been carried throughout this entire game. And I'm going to keep saying it. He's not a strategist. He is not a mastermind. No matter what he says, he did not put the strategy together for the cookout. Tiffany is and always will be seen as the mastermind behind the cookout. And Big D, he talks a lot of stuff. And that's part of the game, so that's to be expected. But I think it would come across a little better if he'd actually done something in the game to back what he's talking about, to back it up. And he has not. So he hasn't won anything. He complains. It just, and the way he talks about, I don't want to go on another long rant about that, but he's a joke. Azah, okay, she's like that girlfriend that you just want to shake and say, girl, get it together. I'm not convinced anything she has done in this game was intentional. I'm going to repeat that. I am not convinced that anything she has done in this game was intentional. I think she landed in a spot, not of her own volition. Her votes were valuable to get them to the final 6, but she had no strategic input, or no input to the strategy, I should say. They always told her to plan after the fact. She didn't help build the plan. She just followed. She gave pushback a lot. She wanted to be included in the strategy. They wouldn't let her. They only found value in her vote. she resented that. Yeah, and now she landed here. So no one's going to convince me she's done anything intentionally to get where she is, aside from the fact that she voted with the cookout to get to the final six. But again, it was her vote. She didn't offer any strategy, or she tried to offer strategy, but a lot of times it didn't make sense. But it wasn't anything she's done up to this point. It wasn't intentional. Anything she's doing now, moving forward, okay, I want to acknowledge her HOH win, which I'm not convinced she... I think X threw that, but people are saying, no, she won it. Okay, I'll give you that. She won an HOH. Okay. She has something to add to her resume. But you guys, now she is talking like she's been so underestimated in the game, and she knew how she was playing, and she knew she was going to make the final three. And she's playing great now, and all this other stuff. And it's so funny because some of the Ozzy stands on Twitter, they were trying to convince me that, Ozzy was good at being in final six. Yeah, no, she wasn't. And this is what I'm talking about. It's like there was no strategy. Ozzy talks like, oh yeah, put me up, and I'm fine with going at 6. But no. It's $750,000, people, and she wants to get to the end. And if anybody who thinks like, oh, she was good where she's at, and she's good being third and all, no, that's not true. They all want the money. They all want the grand prize, right? It's just that she has no strategic pull or plan to get there. What's happening around her is getting her there. Everyone else's plays is getting her to where she's at. And psychologically, I get why she needs to say that to herself, right? It kind of protects your mental state. It really takes a strong sense of self to realize that you've done nothing in the entire game, and now you're where you are, right? And it had nothing to do with any strategy that you put in. So it takes a strong sense of self to admit that to yourself, and she can't do it. So she has to tell herself these lies, or try to convince herself and others, by being on the live feeds and talking like, I did this. No, you didn't. You got there based on other people's plays, starting with Tiffany's master plan. That's how you got there, Ozzy. All right. I just can't with Ozzy. I'll say this. If she wins the final HOH, and I think I said this in my last episode, if she wins that final HOH and takes Derek F, I will then acknowledge that that's a good move for her personal game, and I believe that she would go on to win the season. But let's be real. If that happens, she's not going to be revered or respected as one of the greatest BB players. She's just not. She'll be viewed similar to like a Nicole F or a Josh Wynn, And don't get me wrong, I definitely prefer for her to win over Derek F, and preferably prefer her to win over X Xavier. But the Ozzy stands, please spare me with the delusions of how well Ozzy played and it was her plan. It's just simply not true. Okay. All right. And Xavier. Oh my God. Like, for me, he continues to drop in the likability ratings. He's just more and more unlikable. The longer he stays in this game, the more unlikable he is. And it's not because he wasn't my pick. It has nothing to do with that. I just think he's another one that continues to rewrite history. Him whining for hours about Tiffany and being selfish. He went on another rant, like not a rant, but he whined another time. He's done it multiple times where he whines about Tiffany and being so selfish. And then the mansplaining. It's just obnoxious to me. And the fact that he's gaslighting Ozzy to believe she's a competitor and has done a lot to get where she is. When weeks before this, they were in a conversation where Ozzy asked Xavier if he thought that she did anything. And he told her, I don't know what you've done. I'm sure you've done something, but he didn't know what it was. And to me, that was like, she was upset by that. and on the verge of tears. And I remember that. She wanted the truth, and he told her, listen, you may have done something, I just don't know what it is. And that is telling. And now all of a sudden it's changed, right? Because he is just vying for both Big D and Ozzy, no matter who wins that final HOH, to bring him along. And I get his gameplay, but it's just the hypocrisy when he turns right around to say, oh, well, Tiffany's so selfish. Like, it's just the hypocrisy is suffocating. I just can't take it. I just can't take it. Tiffany put the cookout first before her own personal gameplay, period. And like I said before, Xavier, Big D, and Kylan will all owe Tiffany a public apology with all of this foul shit they keep saying and the mansplaining and the misogyny. It's ugly. I don't like it. It's unacceptable. And I hope they get lit up on Twitter. I really do. And lit up meaning, like, I hope they get a hard time for the way they've carried on about Tiffany. All right, so my rant is over. So let me finish this up. I don't want to make this too long. They also aired in the episode. They also aired where they look back on the season. They do that every year with the final 3. And they captured one segment where they talked about being black and the different representations of being black. And I thought it was a good segment. It was short, but I thought it was a good segment. Black people are not a monolith, like I said earlier. And like we've seen this season, we had an upfront seat when watching the 6 black players this season. And I'm happy that they were all different and unique in their own way. And I'm super excited that we're going to have our first black winner on Big Brother US. Now, I could go a little bit more into Big D's delusions. We all know he has no resume. He has no gameplay, no strategy, and no grip on reality, quite frankly. I think we've all seen it. We've all said it before. We're probably getting tired of talking about it. I know I am. But I can't help but talk about it because the way he carries on those live feeds, and then the edits he's getting in the episodes that air would lead you to believe that he is really doing something in this game. And it's just not true. It's just not true. The best finale I think I'd like to see would be Azah winning that final HOH, evicting Xavier, and for that alone, I think she'll win the season. The jury will most likely vote for her in a unanimous vote. So where we are now, I'd be very satisfied with that ending. In the next episode to the finale, we'll see who and how, the part 1 and part 2. Well, I think on Sunday they're going to show part 1, and then on finale night we'll see part 2. So I'll talk about the part 1 and part 2 leading up to the final HOH when I do my recap of the season. So we'll learn who won those each part, and then how it all unfolds on finale night. I'm looking forward to the jury questions, and I'm looking forward to the speeches. It should be very, very interesting. And I'm going to tell you right now, if Big D is in the final 2 seats, I can't wait for him to try to claim anything in terms of strategizing for the cookout. I think X will counter that. I think a lot of people will start laughing. Remember when Enzo was saying stuff and everyone was laughing, like, because they didn't take Enzo seriously either. They thought he was a joke as well. I think the same thing is going to happen with Big D. And it's just going to be interesting to watch. He's going to be in for a rude awakening when he gets out of that Big Brother house. And I'm going to be here for it. Yeah. All right, so Ozzy needs to win that final HOH, evict Xavier to win the season. I'm sending positive vibes her way. That she'll be able to pull it off and make this move. I really, really, sincerely wish her to have a BB story that ends really, really strong, All right, so what say you? What did you think about Kai's exit after he was evicted? What do you think about Xavier's strategy of gaslighting Azah and Big D? Do you think Big D really believes what he's saying? When he came up with other words to describe how he carried Ozzy in the game, saying that, okay, Ozzy doesn't like me to use the word carried, so I'm going to use other words. Backpacked her, suitcased her. I mean, I did laugh, but not because I thought there was any truth to it, but because it's like the mental maneuvering he has to do to sleep at night. Like, he has convinced himself he really has done something, including carrying Ozzy to the final 3 seats, when Ozzy has now won more competitions than him. So how, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. He's going to be in for a rude awakening, especially when he see how fans are viewing him. The same goes for Xavier, and the same goes for Kylan. But anyway, be sure to come back and give me a listen, give me a follow, subscribe, leave me a comment, leave me a message. Let me know your thoughts. You can find me by looking for Chatter Out Loud. I have this podcast, I tweet, I'm on YouTube, so look for Chatter Out Loud and you'll find me. I also have links to where you can find me in the description, so please be sure to check that out. Yeah. So my name is Danielle, and you're listening to my podcast, Chatter Out Loud. Thank you so much for joining me. I always appreciate your support. And that's all I have. So thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.